All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being with us today. My name's Nate Gilbert, and you are currently visiting and spending some time with the University of Louisville, and we're happy that you are here with us today. We're going to cover a number of things today. The first of those, we're going to give you some tips on essay writing, and we have a gentleman here from our Department of English. His name's Steve Smith, and I'll let him take over in just a moment. Then after Steve wraps up here in about 30 minutes, we're going to have someone come in from our Career Development Center and give you some tips for interviewing and resumes. The idea with this video is, regardless of where you're looking at going to school, this is scholarship season, so we want to give you some tips and pointers. With that being said, I will go on and turn it over to Steve and let you spend some time with him for the next 30 minutes. Thanks and enjoy.
Thank you, Nate. Hello, my name is Steve Smith, and I am the dual credit coordinator in English for the University of Louisville, so that I work with about 6 or 7 local area high schools who teach dual credit courses in those schools. And today I'm going to talk about the component of the scholarship process of writing for those scholarships and for applications as well. And so I'm going to talk about both letters and essays. And I kind of talk about them in the same way because you need to learn to make the same rhetorical moves. And let's get started. I'll be watching for questions that pop up, and if I get a chance, I'll address those questions if you want to send them in. Okay, first of all, I need to talk about rhetorical situations very briefly. First of all, rhetoric is simply, to kind of boil it down, is the use of persuasive language. And the last time that you asked to borrow the parent's car or to ask for a raise in allowance, then you were in a rhetorical situation because you were having to convince them that you needed that car for a certain occasion, or that you really did need more money on the week, or whatever it may be. We're always in the middle of some type of situation where we're trying to convince someone that what we're saying is true, or that our beliefs are sound, or that something needs to be done. We do it all the time. So this is a very specific rhetorical situation where you're speaking to a college admissions committee or a scholarship committee about why you are the person that should be going to their school or should be awarded a scholarship. And keep those kinds of situations in mind. And so when that is the situation, we need to look at who's involved. So there are 3 texts. First text is the mental text. We write in our minds. Often before you put down your first word, your first sentence, you already have 2 or 3 ways in mind that you're thinking about writing that sentence, or in completely different directions. So you have your mental text that you need to be thinking about. And then the other one that you really need to think about is, of course, the letter itself, or the essay, the scholarship essay. And that's where that mental text that you have gets onto the computer screen or onto the piece of paper as you begin to compose your thoughts. But there's a third text, and that third text that exists is the one that you really need to think about from the very beginning. And you'll also need to start doing research about that mental text, and that's the reader's mental text. Because in every situation, whether it's writing or speaking, there's an audience. Of course, that's the reader. And then there's you, the writer or speaker, and then there's the medium, the message. And so what we want to do is try to have these 3 texts come together as closely as possible so that we can be more persuasive in what we're trying to accomplish with our message. So I'm going to really start talking about this third text, especially the reader's mental text, that audience. And remember, that audience is the college admissions or scholarship committee. So if you're thinking about an admissions reader's mental text, or again, someone who is reading scholarship applications and scholarship essays, just what is that mental text? What do they have in their mind? Because all readers bring a set of assumptions, a set of beliefs, a set of values to every reading, whatever that reading may be. And so this is a very specific situation, thinking about persuading your audience that you are the person who should be awarded a scholarship. Okay, so what is that admission reader's mental text? First of all, you need to think about this. They are very connected with the university that you're applying to. Okay, they probably work in admissions office. They most likely are recruiting students across the nation on a weekly basis, year-round. They're meeting with parents, they're meeting with students, and they know their university well. They know the goals and the mission of their university, and they really have a good feel for the kinds of students they want to bring to that university, and the kinds of students that they think will take that scholarship money and do the most with it and be the most successful. So you need to think about that and keep that in mind all the time. And I strongly urge you to start doing research on the universities that you're applying to. Go online, find out as much about that university as possible, find out as much about the scholarship as possible, and use that information to help you shape your own text so that you understand who you're writing to. And this is sometimes difficult because if we're talking to someone that we already know, then we kind of already have a pretty good idea of how they feel. You have a pretty good idea about the mental text that your mom or dad has about you borrowing the family car. So you already have that. You've already done your research. But if you haven't done your research on the university, you really need to begin doing that. Okay, so what's an admission reader's mental text? Okay, they might not be quite that scared, but during the admissions season, once all the admissions have come in, and once all the scholarship applications have come in, then those readers will be faced with quite a few stacks of applications like this. I heard one admissions officer at Boston University say that every summer he reads at least 2,000 applications, and that's just one. So you think 2,000, it'd be really hard to do 2,000 in a day or even a week, so he's probably spending a few weeks going through those applications. And when you read that many, it's very easy for them to all begin to sound alike, no matter what they say. So you only want to read so many a day, and so what's that? What are they bringing to their own reading? What's in their heads besides what they know about their university? Well, I think that all of them will probably have something like this. I hope there are a few good ones today. And you can use that to your advantage, because if you know that they're wanting to read a good one, then give them a good one. You know, give them something that they can really feel like, oh wow, this is good. And because if you can stop them and get them to really engage with your writing, then that's going to be what I call sticky. You're going to stick with them, and they're going to put your essay into a keeper pile, okay? Whereas some other essay might go into a maybe pile. And so you want that essay to go into a keeper pile to be read again, probably by another person down the line, because it's usually more than one person who looks at these, especially scholarship applications. Okay, so remember, they're hoping for a few good ones. But you also need to think about, what do those admissions officers not like to read? Okay, and I'm going to show you a picture. They don't really want to read something like this. This is a Big Mac. Well, actually, it's a picture of a Big Mac. But if you get a Big Mac in Louisville, Kentucky, or you get a Big Mac in Manhattan, or a Big Mac in Los Angeles, you're pretty much getting the same Big Mac. And so that's where you want to give them an essay, a letter, that is very original. And how do you do that? Well, the way to do that is to write about yourself. You have got to bring yourself into that writing. And there's only one way to do that, and that's to share who you are. So what do they not like to read? They don't like to read essays where they're all the same all day long for the next 2 or 3 weeks. Make yours stand out. Okay. So we're going to look at some experts. One is an associate director of admissions at the University of Georgia. Thousands of applications, thousands of scholarship applications every year. And Patrick Winters says the essay is where students can distinguish themselves and enhance all the other information that's already on their application. Now think about that, okay? You're going to send them an application form that might be a page, 2, 3 pages long, with all these boxes and things to fill out, scores to fill in, GPAs to fill in, and everything. And then you're going to give them either a curriculum vitae or a resume listing your accomplishments and awards and so forth. And then you're going to give them an essay for application or for scholarship. And he says the essay is where you can make everything stand out. So think about just something like a GPA, okay? If it's a scholarship, then many scholarships begin at something like a 3.5 on an unweighted scale. So all the GPAs they're looking at are 3.5 to 4.0, and probably a great many of them are all 4.0s. So if they have 100 4.0 GPAs come in, and they have, you know, a whole bunch of 30 plus ACT scores come in, then how do they, you know, pick and choose between all these scores and GPAs that look alike? Yes, they'll look at the resume, but the one thing that's most powerful is that essay, okay? And that's where you really need to start spending some time developing it. Okay, another piece of advice from Winter is they shouldn't restate what's already obvious based on grades or teacher recommendations. Use the essay to show who you really are. And again, the way to do that is to talk about yourself. Okay? And again, don't talk about my GPA was this, or my test scores were this, or my awards were this. There's someplace else in the application materials. Okay. Another expert, Melanie Nicholson at Wilkes University in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. She says if you've had a life-changing event, that's great, but most people haven't. And what I say as far as this goes, if you have had a life-changing event and it's really affected the person that you are now, you should really talk to friends, family, teachers, mentors, tell them what this life-changing event is and get their advice as to whether or not you should include it in your essay. They will give you some good advice. It all depends on what the event was. Yes, it was life-changing, but life-changing events can be a whole gamut of things, and some things may not be appropriate for a scholarship application because of the specific situation of, you know, writing an essay asking for a scholarship award. So it all depends. So get some advice from people whose opinions you trust and tell them what it is you want to share. And then let them read it after you've written it and get some more feedback from them. Okay? Also, Nicholson says, write about a person who's inspired you. Okay? Now think about this. If you write about a teacher or a family member or a minister or someone in your life who has really inspired you and kind of given you some type of model to follow and has worked with you on education or sports or a project of some type, that shows a university and a committee what you are like in interaction with other people. Because when you're coming to a university like the University of Louisville, which is one of the most diverse universities in the nation, you're coming here with people from all across the state of Kentucky, all across the U.S., and all across the world. Many universities are like that and seek that kind of experience for their students to have. And so they want to know how you are working with other people. And when you're at a university, something that I think is very important is for students to develop mentorships. So what is your history like in developing a mentorship? And if you write about someone who has influenced you, then this will give them a pretty good picture of how that works in your life. Okay? Also, think about this. Because there are so many, hundreds, thousands of students applying for a given scholarship, there's no way they can interview everyone. There might be an interview process once they have narrowed the field down, but the essay is basically a virtual interview. So colleges want to know who you are, so students should write as if you're talking to a real person. Okay? Avoid laundry lists of achievements. You know, if you sat down and talked to me right now, hopefully you wouldn't tell me this whole list of things that you've done and places you've been and, you know, accomplishments that you've had in your life. Hopefully you would start telling me some stories, or you're going to lose me pretty quickly. And it says, don't use it as a place to make excuses for less than stellar grades. On the other hand, if you had a really bad semester, say your second semester of sophomore year in high school, and it kind of sticks out like a sore thumb, then perhaps you should address it, tell them what happened, and then tell them how you solved that problem. Be brief, be concise, be positive, don't complain, and show that you were able to take care of it. That could work in your favor. They're going to notice it anyway, so just having it there on your transcript and not saying anything about it, then they don't know what to think. So if you do at least say something about it, then they have a better picture, a fuller context. Also, I need to consider your ethos, okay? Ethos is your credibility as a speaker, as a writer, and as a thinker. And so you need to think about the ethos that your application presents. Notice what Winter says. Very often we come across students with fantastic grades, test scores, and extracurricular activities. And then notice that they have an email address that's completely inappropriate. That tends to communicate a bit about who they are, whether they intend that or not. So you really need to check those kinds of things. Remember, ethos equals credibility. And so Winter advises that you register for a standard email address, okay? First name, last name. It's easy to do on Yahoo or Gmail, and using a dot or an underscore or something like that to separate names, and using all that for your college-related correspondences. Also, Facebook, Twitter, social media accounts, you know, clean those up. Colleges sometimes will go and see what's available to the public view just to get a sense of the person that you present to the world and to your friends. So think about that too, because that will give them an indication of how credible you are in terms of what you're writing about in your essay. So I think that's good advice. Okay, some practice. And you may want to write these down. This video will be archived, and I believe we will tell you later on where you can find it after the session is over. But you may want to write down, first of all, make a list of struggles, conflicts, obstacles, and challenges you've had to overcome. Okay, think about this. Universities are places where research is extremely important. Okay, these are institutions of higher learning. And our world, goodness knows, is full of all kinds of problems, both old problems which still haven't been solved, and new problems that crop up every day because of new technologies and everything in the world. So universities are places where questions are asked about these problems and then solutions are sought. So if you can talk about how you have encountered a struggle or some type of obstacle or challenge in your life and how you went about addressing that and how you attempted to solve it and to work with it or to overcome it, that tells them a lot about who you are. And that will involve you having to tell a story from your life. So we are our stories, okay? And when I say story, I'm talking about a narrative of that creates a picture of the person that you are. And this is going to give them a better view of, yes, your scholarship is going to be there in the application materials, other places. But they, again, remember, this is a virtual interview. They want to meet the person that is behind those scores and behind those GPAs and grades and so forth, and those awards and those community projects. Who's the person? So let them get to meet you by telling a story about something like this. Also, another thing, well, if you have any influences or mentors, did they help you overcome these obstacles? How did they work with you? To what degree did you go to them with questions? How did you listen to them? How did you take their advice and then incorporate it or somewhat adjust it because you needed to? So the more you can tell about how you approached a certain obstacle or challenge or problem in your life and how you involved other people in helping you solve that, I think the better. It also gives you a richer story to tell. And when I say story, keep in mind, again, ethos and credibility. Okay, you want to, of course, be truthful about this. Don't stretch the truth. Tell it like it was. Lay it on the table. But again, go to those trusted friends and family and mentors and get them to give you feedback as well. They've brought you this far. Don't forget them now. Okay, involve them in the process. Okay, and another one. What's one thing you've learned from your experience of meeting a challenge or overcoming an obstacle? Okay, so show how you learn from it by using vivid images. And that part's really important. If you can work on the vivid images, on the concrete details, not deal in abstracts, okay, not deal in things like courage or bravery or forthrightness. Those are all great abstract ideas, and they can kind of be the focus of the story. But for the story to come alive, you're going to have to describe things in detail. And I realize you may have a word limit, and if it says 500 word limit or 1,000 word limit, then stick to that limit and don't go past it. But make the most of it by being as descriptive as you can, using color, okay? Using words that appeal to the five senses, okay? So that it'll come alive. And put your reader, that scholarship committee reader, in your life and feel like they're getting to know the real you. And this is something I just played with the word revise. In my teaching, revise is at the center of the writing process. Again, like I said earlier, before you've written that first word, you've already come up with 3 words before you've written it down. I'm looking here for questions, and I'm new with this screen. I'm not seeing on the interface any questions for me. So this whole thing about the more eyes the better, get friends, get family, get trusted teachers to read your essay in draft form, give you feedback. Ask them good questions. What do you want to know about the essay? Give them questions and don't just expect them to read it cold. Involve them in a conversation with you about this process. They'll have time for you, and they'll help you make the most of it. One other thing, as you're beginning this process, if you haven't started yet, you may feel overwhelmed. Writing is sometimes a difficult task. I know many writers, published professional writers, who say once they have finished a novel or a story or a poem, then they're left with the blank page again. That's the way it always works. Don't be overwhelmed by that. Sometimes when there's really high stakes involved, like scholarship awards, like admissions to your top university you want to go to, those kinds of stakes can really put a lot of pressure on you. And so what you need to do, and this might sound strange, but you need to lower your standards. My mentor poet, William Stafford, told his students, lower your standards when you're writing. He said, I used to write a poem every morning before I got out of bed. I wrote a lot of bad poems that way, but that's how I had to get to the good ones. So if you lower your standards at the beginning and get the whole process going, especially your research and finding out about these universities and about these scholarships as much as possible, knowing the kinds of students they're looking for, then you'll know your audience better. So you can write about what you know. And so that is the university, the scholarship, and most of all, you. Okay? And then as you begin drafting and getting more feedback from your friends, then you can start to raise your standards as you go and get that essay as good as it possibly can be. I'm seeing one question here from Mr. Lyons. If an essay asks about a future endeavor, such as an international travel opportunity, should you tie all the things of your past like you described? Ask about a future endeavor. I think when you're asked to write about something in the future that hasn't happened yet, then again, you need to write about what you know. And when I say write about something in your life, I'm asking you to be very targeted in selecting something to talk about. So don't tell them your whole life story. Okay, if I implied that, I didn't mean to. You don't want to tell them your life story. You want to pick an important story, 2, maybe 3 at the most, that have helped to make you the person and the student you are today. And so if you're looking at something where you're having to write about a future endeavor, like an international travel opportunity, then you need to think about, okay, what in your life today would help you in another culture? What kinds of attributes do you have now, and how did those attributes get developed in you, which will require you telling a story? How did those get developed in your personal life that would help you in another culture, in another nation, somewhere else? That's my best advice there. Okay. And I'm looking at another one here from Mr. Hamilton. Are all scholarships competitive with essays, or are there scholarships rewarded just for your GPA and ACT? I'm not sure if you're referring to the University of Louisville. We have a scholarship page that perhaps we'll show you how to get there shortly. But in my experience, there are very few scholarships that are rewarded just for GPA and ACT these days, because you're looking at, they're so competitive that telling one 4.0 36 ACT score student from another one really needs an essay to get to know who that person is. The scores can only tell the committees so much. So I would say that those are few and far between. Okay, I'm going to turn it over now to our host, and my email is spsmit02@louisville.edu. Feel free to write to me if you have more questions after this session ends, and I will be sure to get back to you. Good luck and good writing.
Thanks, Steve. Perfect. All right. I hope y'all enjoyed what Steve had to say and found that useful. I'll also remind you, after we finish up with our presentations, we will be chatting on College Week Live from 4:30 to 6 p.m. So staff from our office will be available to chat with you if you have any questions. With that being said, our next presenter is here. His name is Matt Reel, and he's a career coach senior in our Career Development Center, and he's going to give you all some tips on resume building and also with interviewing. That's right, Matt. So I will turn the computer Matt's way and let him get comfortable, and I hope you'll enjoy your time with him.
Sure, thanks, Nate. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, good afternoon. As Nate mentioned, I'm going to talk to you all a little bit about resume and interviewing. I know this is a time where you're applying for a lot of things, scholarships, colleges, many different opportunities. So I want to just give you some tips, hints, things that I see, things that I've learned about being successful in that process. So hopefully these will be helpful to you. Getting started, we're going to look at we're going to first look at resume writing, and I always start off telling everyone to consider there's no right way to do a resume. So getting hung up on there's this perfect thing I need to do, that's forgetting that we're all unique. We all have our own individual education and experiences that we need to highlight. So at first I would say concentrating on there are some wrong ways to do a resume. So avoiding those mistakes that might harm you in the selection process. So here you can see some of the resume errors that executives have indicated are common mistakes. I like to start with the sort of negative or the bad, because typically with these situations, whether it's a job, whether it's admission into school, whether it's a scholarship, there's a lot of applicants. So the people that are making these selections have to get through 100, maybe 200 candidates or applicants, and so at first they're not always looking for qualifications, but rather they're looking for disqualifications. So we want to avoid those. So we want to be aware of what they are so we can address them and avoid them. The first one you can see are obviously typos and grammatical errors. These are typical. That's just resolved by having someone look over your stuff. Next, you can see too much information, too little information. This just should indicate there's kind of an art form to doing this. And I'm going to go, as we go through, talk a little bit about what's the right information to include. How do we include the information? Not just that we have information, we have content, but that we're presenting it the right way. So that's a lot of what I'm going to talk about. So now I want to talk about getting started. Some of you may already have a resume. A lot of us do. If you do, that's okay. If you don't, you can start from scratch. I'll tell you, obviously I have a resume, I've used it, but I continue to update mine, and I use this technique. So I would say getting started, just write everything down that you've done. Whether it was for an hour or it was a part-time job you've had for a few months. Write it all down, and then we can edit and include what we want. But the hard part is remembering what we've done. So just like I'm doing this presentation today, I need to write that down. I need to make a note so that I can include it later. That's the same things that you should be doing. As you do something, be sure to write it down so you can include it in your resume. So next, as we have our list of everything written down. We want to start to build the resume. How do we do that? What do we include? What's the right thing to have? What's the wrong stuff to have? I say you should be asking yourself these 3 questions. Is this information accessible? Is it relevant? Is it consistent? And probably the most important thing I can say to you today is that first question, accessible. Thinking about making your information clear, readable, findable. That's accessibility. I need to be able to, I don't know you, I need to be able to interact with your information and not have to spend time figuring it out or looking through some weird formatting or organization. And so that's really what we focus on with accessibility, is organization and formatting. That's how we make it clear. So the first step with organization is selecting categories, and you can see here some of the list of categories I have. In the middle is kind of the most common accepted categories people organize their information into, and then I have some additional categories. Again, back to that thing, no right way. It's unique to you. What have you done? What's your education? Determining what to call those categories. But here's some categories, and I'm going to go through a couple of these and talk about the formatting that could lead to a successful resume in each category. So let's start with the first one, the header, your contact information. It's a pretty easy one. Who are you? What's your name, address, telephone number, email. The thing that gets people hung up here is especially email. Maybe it's an email you've used for many years now. But it might not be that professional. So just review and think about it before you put it on your resume. What is that saying about me? I see it all the time here at U of L. It might be cutecardinal@louisville.edu, and that's not what we want. Just use or create a new one if you need to. Same with the telephone number. People call, whether it's a landline to your house or it's your cell phone. What is that voicemail I'm going to get when I call you and you don't answer? That again is going to say something about who you are, your professionalism. So just be aware that you're always on, and the people are always assessing you, looking for those disqualifications. Next is an objective statement. I get questions about this a lot. It's something people include a lot, and this is probably a really good example of something you don't have to have. People include it and think they have to have it, and they got to write one, they don't know how to write it. My opinion, honestly, is leave it out. I think we're shifting to people don't like it, people don't know what to do with it, so remove it, leave it out. Your essays, your cover letters, these things can really act as an objective statement for you, so concentrate on those. Use those to communicate why you're applying or what this means to you, okay? So yeah, when in doubt, leave it out. Next is the education section. So this is where you're really going to highlight, what did I do in high school? What are the maybe some honors I had? What was my grade point average? Was there a major, a concentration I had? Was it STEM or was it in the arts or something? This is where you can highlight some of that. So you want to list your institution, you want to list when you're going to graduate, GPA, and you can see underneath the green box all kinds of stuff, special projects, research if you did something, honors papers. It might be if you studied abroad or went somewhere, that might be worth putting in the education section. Here's a quick example of what it'll look like when you write it in the formatting, and you'll see the category title I have here, education. It's very intentional, all caps, bold, underline. That's clearly going to indicate here's a new section. I'm starting a new section here with education. You can see the high schools listed, the grade point average, and I'm listing honors and related courses there. You don't have to have those. You can. It's just an example of the kind of how you can craft it yourself. Okay, so moving on to experience. This is one that trips a lot of people up too. So experiences, what do I include, Matt? What's a good experience? What's valuable? I would say include anything that you've done, especially up to this point. A part-time job, a seasonal job, leadership, could be volunteer, maybe something with your church. All these experiences are great. And again, it could be something you did for an hour, a day, or 6 months. So all these are important. Also as important is how are you formatting these experiences. You'll see I have format and next to it some of those words again. Be consistent, be concise. This is going to allow it to be more accessible, easy to read. You'll see underneath there, I think you need to have 5 things in your formatting. You should have your job title, the employer's name, the city and state, and the dates you worked there, including month and year. Always month and year. If you just put 2011 to 2012, that could be 2 months or it could be 2 years. I need to know. So people leave that off a lot. Include month and year. Again, here's an example of what it'll look like. The title is in all caps, bold, underline again, clear designation of where the new category begins. You'll see I have all that information listed, and I have the 5th important thing to have under your experience, which is the descriptions of what your responsibilities, what are your tasks, what did you do there. This is a part that people have a lot of trouble with. What should I include, Matt? What do I write here? What do I mean? How do I describe my job? If you're looking for a job, often it's using the job description that they have. If it's a scholarship, what do they say they're looking for? Like what's going to make a competitive candidate or applicant? And also thinking about these, what are the different types of skills I could be highlighting? Transferable skills, knowledge-based skills, and personal traits. So making a list of those for yourself, trying to include those, making sure you're addressing what their needs or what their wants are. Another way to make sure those stand out is don't be real passive in your explanations. Don't just write customer service, but write, you'll see here I've provided customer service for retail exchanges. It's just a little more articulate, a little more professional. So think about developing those explanations. The last section we're going to look at is involvement. This can be kind of a catch-all category. It's often called lots of different things. In this resume example I have here, it's leadership activities. It can be volunteer experience and involvement. It could be leadership involvement. There's lots of names for this. But if you've done stuff like you can see under the green box, student organizations, government, clubs, whatever it might be, certain different activities or part-time job, could be any number of things. Make sure you're putting them somewhere. People often, I don't know where to put this on my resume, Matt. Have a section like this that kind of catches all those things so that you're able to sell yourself and market all those cool and interesting things that you've done. Okay, some final tips about resume before we move on to thinking about interviewing. I know I was rolling through that pretty fast. I want to make sure we have time for interviewing and potentially any questions if anybody has any. Some general guidelines are about length. I get that a lot. You should probably keep it to 1 page. It makes it convenient for me, it makes it easy for the person reviewing, and you probably don't have enough information at this point in your life to warrant going to 2 pages. If it is, it's probably just too much fluff. You need to reduce it back. Be concise. Font, margins, if you need to fit it to a page, you can go down to 10-point font. You can go to half-inch margins. You don't have to stick to 1-inch margins, 12-point font. I wouldn't go over 1-inch margins. I wouldn't go over 12-point font. When submitting your stuff electronically, save it as a PDF. If you just send it as a Word document, I might have an old version of Word, you might have a newer one, they might not talk right, so you want me to see exactly what you see on your computer screen. So save it as a PDF and then send it. And last but definitely not least, do not use a template. A big mistake that a lot of people use is they go into Word, they pull up the resume templates, they click the first one, and then you see 20 people with the same formatted resume. It doesn't say you're unique, it says you took the easy way out. So just avoid using a template. It's okay when you start to build to know how to create it, but then I would create my own formatting in my own resume. Here's some just samples of resumes. It's just 2 samples, and I could give you 20 that are really acceptable and really good resumes. These are just some guides to let you know. I mean, they don't look exactly the same. There's some things that are completely different in them, but they follow a genuinely the same type of format that you should be thinking about following as well. Makes it easy for me. I know resumes not extremely exciting, kind of boring. So we'll move on. Thinking about interviews. The first couple things to think about with interviewing, and interviewing's a lot like resume. I mean, these are your tools to market yourself. When none of us are real comfortable marketing and selling ourselves, I get it, I'm not either, but we have to do it. So let's do it effectively, right? So with the interview, these are 3 of the top things you really need to be thinking about. Doing your research. Who am I applying to? What is the company? What is the university? What's the scholarship? Who are the people that are going to be looking at this stuff? Dressing like a professional when you show up for that interview. Have the right shirt, shoes, tie, be clean, groomed, and also be prepared. Have a list of questions. Know why you're there. Bring a pad and paper. Another strategy, I think, when you're starting to think about interviewing and how am I successful in that is the prepared part. And people hear that and people say that, but how do I prepare, Matt? I think this is an effective strategy, technique, is creating a chart to outline your strengths, to outline your skills. So we can do that by first thinking about, what is it and who is it that I'm applying to? The employer's needs, a job description, explanation of the scholarship, a mission statement from a school. There's a lot of great golden information in those that you can use along the one side of the graph, and then across the top of the graph, you're listing your stuff. So maybe it's my education is one part, my experiences is one part, my skill set is another part, and you're trying to line those up and provide examples of descriptions of when I did that, how I did that. This will make you think through it, or write it down and not just think through it, that you'll have some concrete things to think back on, and you can maybe remember how that graph looked and that chart looked, and so your recall will be easier and you'll seem more prepared. Also thinking about, what do people like? What is it that people want? So here's a list of skills and qualities that employers say they're looking for in recent college graduates, and so this is what you need to be building on. This is what people are looking for. So these can be your guide as well. From communication to organization to problem solving and critical thinking. Making sure you're addressing these things, not only in your resume, but also in an interview. And we'll talk more about getting examples of these and stuff like that as we go through the rest of this interview presentation. So interview preparation, I'm already talking a lot about it, but know yourself, know the interview format. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. Make a list of questions and practice. Complete a mock interview with friends, family, a teacher, somebody that can simulate what it's going to be like in the interview. First impressions. So when you're going to interview, the first thing I'm going to do is judge you on how you look. Are you dressed right? Do you seem prepared? Are you taking this serious? So coming in shorts and a hat, probably not acceptable. Be professional. And you can see from the PowerPoint slide here what you should be trying to look like. A suit, a tie. Girls, if you have a suit skirt, length is important. And guys, same, have your ties tied right and all of that, okay? Next is know the type of interview format. These can be different. We're all used to this traditional interview format, one-on-one. I sit across the table from you, we just kind of talk. That's a little more comfortable, we're used to that, but there can be other kinds. So for instance, a team interview or a panel interview, you're sitting at a table across from 2 or 3 people, 4 or 5 maybe. That's a lot more names to remember. It's maybe a little more stressful. So asking beforehand, what's going to be the format of this interview? So a team interview, that's where you might meet with 2, 3, 4, 5 people consecutively, so not at the same time as a panel would be, but answering the same questions over and over again can be fatiguing. And so you want to make sure you're saying all the things to everybody and not forgetting what you said to somebody else or appearing disinterested or disengaged just because you're tired of answering questions. So if you know beforehand, you can prepare for the type of interview you might have. There are some other types of interviews to think about, especially it's 2013. There's a lot of web-based interviewing now through Skype or other avenues, as also phone interviews. And this is just important to think about your surroundings sometimes, like what's going on, especially Skype. What is today? You can see what if there was something crazy behind me, it would be very distracting. Maybe that math is distracting, but there would be that's distracting. Phone interview is the dog barking. Am I in a quiet place? Are my friends around? Making sure you have a professional setting where you can conduct that interview and not be interrupted or not be distracted. Next is just some guidelines about the general stages of an interview. We all kind of know these, but there's the introductions, so a firm handshake, nice greeting. Then you're going to answer a lot of questions, broad and specific, and then you're going to have a conclusion. So how do you end the interview? I'm going to talk in detail a little bit about each of these. So the first is the type of interview questions: traditional, situational, behavioral. And I'm going to go through each of these types. So traditional examples, the big one is tell me about yourself. Every interview you're probably ever going to have for anything, it's going to start with, hey Matt, tell me a little bit about who you are. What do I include? What do I talk about? It can be hard. It can be difficult. So think about, what is my education? Why am I here? What do I want these people to know about me? Not what did I do in the 2nd grade, but professionally. What is my focus educationally? What are my goals professionally? What is it about this institution or this scholarship or this job or this company that really interests me, that has brought me here today? So really try to summarize all of that in about a minute or 2. Think about it like a 1-minute commercial. What are you going to say? Practice it. And then next, you're also going to get questions about short-term, long-term goals, strengths, weaknesses, and then people might ask you about their company. Tell us about what you know about us. Next is behavioral and situational questions, and these, the tell me about yourself question is important, and it usually starts off the interview, so it's important to be prepared for that. But the behavioral and situational are often the hardest questions and the one that people freak out about. And they worry about these behavioral and situational, and they neglect the tell me about yourself. So that's why I start with that. Give tell me about yourself equal preparation and stress that you have for the behavioral and situational. So the technique with behavioral and situational is simply to consider what are some 2 or 3 or 4 scenarios or situations where I was successful, and maybe even throw in 1 or 2 where I made a mistake or it was a failure, because you can talk about what you learned. But if you have 2 or 3 success scenarios, you can then start to do this, which is the STAR method. And STAR method stands for situation, task, action, results. So you're going to think about that situation, you're going to explain it to me, then you're going to describe the tasks that were involved, what actions did you take or were involved, and then the results that came. So if you can, and especially write that down, not just practice it in your mind, but practice saying it, practice writing it, you'll be more comfortable again, and your recall will be better. You'll sound more prepared when you're in that interview, instead of trying to come up with it off the top of your head. If you're preparing it, then that'll be better. So here's some examples of the STAR method, or questions you could use for the STAR method. Your classmate fails to complete a project on time, negatively impacting your work. How would you deal with the situation? Tell me about a time you had to work with a difficult coworker. How did you handle that? And finally, can you provide a specific example of when you utilize good problem-solving skills? So these are just a few of the examples that are situational, behavioral in nature. Next, I want to just talk about and kind of summarize some interview tips, some I've already talked about, but some I want to just reinforce. So the first thing is preparing those success stories, thinking about what am I already going to talk about. When they ask me, I already have stuff prepared. I'm ready to go. I don't have to think in the moment. That's usually what trips people up. And they tell me about yourself, or the situational and behavioral is they've never thought once about it. So prepare, think through these things, write them out. And provide relevant experiences as an example, especially if someone's asking you about strengths or weaknesses. What's a strength? Oh, I'm really hardworking. We need more. So don't just say an adjective, but provide a relevant example of an experience of when you were hardworking on a project or at work or something, okay? Don't just let that word stand alone. Again, research the university, department, program, scholarship, company, whatever it is. Think about this interview, as I said, as your marketing, branding, selling yourself. It's hard to do, but we have to do it. You need to provide me that information. Otherwise, I'm going to pick someone else who can. Maintain a conversational flow. Repeat your key strengths. Don't overdo it, but it's important that they leave with some highlights, or they remember Matt because he is XYZ, and they have some takeaways, okay? Image is just as important as content, and especially social media. You have an online internet image, so whether it's Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, you're presenting yourself in some way, and people will research that stuff, so just be aware, privacy settings or things like that. Ask questions. I hear it from whether it's a committee about a scholarship or admissions or a job or whatever. When people came in and asked specifics about the thing they were interviewing for, that made a difference. And in-depth, thoughtful, prepared questions, not just basic general questions. I started out with the resume talk about people looking for disqualifications, not always qualifications. This is a part where you can highlight your qualifications. You can really stand out, okay? Be honest, be confident, and practice, practice, practice. Some final thoughts, mistakes that people make. Again, I started with it, I'll end with it. So mistakes that people make: dress appropriately, don't badmouth, be professional in your talk, and probably the third one here, appearing disinterested. That's a really important one. People get in interviews and it's exhausting sometimes, and people can seem disengaged or disinterested, or and that's going to mean a lot. If you don't seem like you want to be there, then I don't care about you either. So I'll just move on to the next person. And also insufficient answers. You saw some of those that I provided before, and if it, it says, tell me about a time where you had to do problem solving and what was the result. Make sure you do the second part of the question. What was the result? That's also part of the question. So don't just make sure you finish and don't provide insufficient answers. And you can see not asking good questions is a mistake. So make sure you ask good questions. The last thing, the conclusion, the follow-up, be sure to ask them, when will I know, what can I expect to hear from you all, etc. And also make sure they know how to get in contact with you. They have, if you changed a phone number or address, that they have that, and make sure you send the thank you notes. It's just like asking the questions. These things can make a difference. People that don't provide questions, people that don't provide follow-up, how really interested and how serious are they in this opportunity or experience? You need to cover all of those bases so that you're not giving them a reason to disqualify you. Don't do that. Don't give them a reason to disqualify you. Make it hard on them. That's what our job is. Make it hard on them. That's the information that I have. Hopefully that's helpful with your resumes and interviewing, and I would say good luck.
All right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed our two presentations today. Once again, I think that information will prove to be very useful for you all, regardless of if you'll be applying for scholarships at the University of Louisville or at other institutions. Once again, as I wrap things up here, I want to remind you that we will be chatting through our booth at the University of Louisville here on College Week Live from 4:30 until 6 p.m. tonight. So we'll have staff members available for that hour and a half if you all have any questions about scholarships here at the University of Louisville, or about admissions, or just anything related to the university. I'll also mention, if you want to visit our main website, you can go to Louisville, that's LOUISVILLE.edu. You can do a little bit of your own research and browsing right there. Also, something I'll mention, if you're in the greater Louisville area, or if you're a fan of basketball, our national championship basketball team is playing this evening at 7 p.m. So, of course, basketball fan, hop on and take a watch at that. Once again, thank you. I appreciate you all spending some time with us this afternoon. Let us know if you ever have any questions, and we look forward to chatting with some of you all here in the next hour and a half. Thanks, and take care.